will be 10. Quindi al primo intervento 10 minuti e poi allora buongiorno. Come? Però dopo va bene. Le questioni, se ci sono. Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon.
I encourage each of you to put the earphones because we will speak in different languages: Italian, English, French. C'è la traduzione nelle cuffie.
There is translation in the headphones with different channels. One is the channel, I believe, I'll have to check. English, French, Italian. I have a sheet of paper somewhere here to tell you which one, but it's disappeared. So I will entertain you until I find what the channel numbers are for which language. Channel 1?
Okay. Channel 2 is English. Channel 3 is German, Deutsch. Il nostro incontro si svolgerà.
Our meeting will take place with the first contribution from our speakers, and the second part will have the possibility to ask some questions and enable our speakers to give an answer. So if any question pops up in your mind, please write it down to keep it for later. I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and for those who have organized the meeting of this afternoon. Thank you for finding this science fiction-like place. But today is a special day. I'd like to ask every one of us to dedicate some time of silence for the victims of all wars, but today also for all the victims of the earthquake in Morocco. So I would like to ask every one of us to keep silent for a moment. That may God bless Morocco and life forever. First, I'd like to introduce this afternoon From Self to Us with several reflections to free our speakers and witnesses of the problem to speak too much about the self. I hope that they will help us find reasons that are new and important to construct, to build an us that is still difficult to see. But it seemed almost too easy for me to feel that I'm part of the us, being a part of the community of Sant'Egidio. Saying that the self is only something bad. I remember in 1992, the year that the peace in Mozambique was signed, that in Santa Maria in Trastevere we've celebrated with a great big prayer, followed by dances spontaneously, dancing in the church for about an hour spontaneously about this victory on the war that caused 1 million of deaths. One of the greatest personal happinesses, because it was a clean happiness, a clean joy. Joy for others, not for me. And that was true for everyone. But a year later, in Italy, a small book was published that spoke well of egoism. The title was The Threats of Solidarity, and it spoke about the bad smell of incense of solidarity. While just a year before, the clean collective happiness of the us. It seemed to me the beginning of a thought that the self returned. There was a long road of self in the history of thought and reflection, human history. I will not go into details of the history of philosophy with the professor next to me, but because she's so good, because out of mercy she won't correct me, she left pity on me. For millennia, the self, the individual, seemed to be inside a group naturally. Seneca begins speaking about the individual, but always inside and in relation with a collectivity. But our time, with a terrible acceleration, I believe, arrived to a life that is possible without relationships, without ties. I think that you cannot live on your own. You can only be alive within relationships and through relationships, but genetics and science allow also a life created without relations. So I wondered how the Western world from the 16th century, 17th century, progressively gave rise to the individual. There was a man, Bernard de Mandeville, a Dutchman, a doctor, who explained solidarity in this way. We give alms to beggars. For the same reason, we go to the foot doctor, so we can, to pathologist, so we can easily walk. So it's utilitarian. But in reality, there is a long story of philosophers. Locke, Kant arrives to become the father of the modern individual on ethic fundaments, the French Revolution. And with the declaration of the man, the citizen, to grant him a charter of rights, fraternity, liberty, equality have been affirmed as values outside of religion, even though they were born within a Christian tradition. Émile Zola said the French Revolution is a great success of Christianity within secularization. But this road this way progressively, as prolonged with theoretics, started with individual and arrived at the power of individualism, that we transformed the individual in an ism without the other, outside of a vision of a collective society. So it's as something has broken down. Todorov spoke about the narcissistic individual, and Bauman explained how our society has affirmed the search for a carnal joy that's not reachable, of the flesh. Mundane joy. This is the framework in which we move, a society that is looking for joy, but it's very sad. Society created by solitude, where you can also affirm yourself without the other. And so in the end, you end up without the other, against the other. That is a framework in which I think we have the responsibility to help each other to rebuild the reasons and the direction, a common direction, a common goal in the Bible. But I think Rabbi Dissenyi will help us. It's written at the beginning of our human history. It's not good that man is alone. And from there, also the entrusting of creation is born from God to mankind. So something is broken down, but it's our responsibility to reconstruct it. So I would like to give the floor now to Donatella Di Cesare. As she says, she's nothing, but she's full professor at the Sapienza University, which is a lot. So she has done a lot. She's vice president of the Martin Heidegger Gesellschaft, and she also takes the responsibility of reflection within history. The floor is yours. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. I was asked to speak in English, but because German is my second language, I would like to speak in German. But I'll do it in Italian. We know very well that our world is a world with the sovereignty of the self, a self full of itself, enclosed within himself, that fears everything that's outside. It lives or survives without projects for the future. The future, as we know, is privatized, like a nightmare in a space by terrible images where everything seems possible, but nothing is. I keep repeating that, but this self that is only thinking about itself is not, and I want to underline that, it's not the old individualistic self of modernity, but a self that is internalized.
In order to save him from the shipwreck, only the other can save him. Unfortunately, he closed the door to the other. The other has been expelled, rejected, banned. Thanks to this violence that is going everywhere, repression is mutated and changed into depression. And depression is one of the great symptoms of our time. It is not only a mental problem. For the I who lives in the space that is without shape of the hyper-communication and hyper-consumerism, the other is not anymore the reason of his existence, because, as we could say, it is an living in himself. This I is competitive and is belligerent. Is an I that is in war against others, is not able to say you, and is not able to recognize, to see where the you is. We are in a scenery, in a time that is crossed by phobia against the outside, and the other is rejected politically, even before doing so existentially. I want to say this clearly. It's not only a single choice, an individual choice. It's not a question of individual behavior, but there is a political dimension. Calculus projection didn't work. People didn't preview that forecast that the negation of the other would become also self-negation. In this way, this area of indifference, surrounded by peripheries of misery, by the periphery of despair, by the theater of war, became a spiral of self-destruction. The way to go out of this is the one that brings from the you to the we of the community. But the problem is, what does it mean, community of the us, of the we? We could take my words in the best case for a naive altruism that doesn't consider reality. In the worst case, we could, in the worst case, we could think that we want to resuscitate the ghost of the past. For me, there is not the one, not the other. The model of the community in which we are immersed today revolves around an immunitarian logic. Even democracy is rooted on this. That is, on the principle of do not touch me and not on participation. Even democracy is founded on the don't touch me. The citizen asks only protection and safety. The democratic community is reduced to an immunitarian system. This is why I speak of immunitarian democracy. But enjoying democracy doesn't mean nothing else but enjoying in an exclusive way rights, guarantees, and defenses. Often in this battle of the rights, we think that there is the most advanced border of the progress. But what happens beyond the borders? The condition of immunity reserved to the others, to the protected, to the preserved, to the guaranteed, is denied to others, to the exposed, to those who are rejected, those who are abandoned, those who are not necessary. In the endless hinterland where the superfluous live, in the refugee camps, in the empty urban camps, people rejected as rubbish, there is not the system of guarantees and insurances. This other humanity is entrusted and given to violence, wars, hunger, sickness, to new slavery. There is a necropolicy, a policy of death, who let sleep those who are superfluous, those who are not necessary to our society. Hannah Arendt already warned us against this double binary between people and not people that was well reinforced by the totalitarian experience. That totalitarian experience was called the waves in the countries, and they would be reduced to naked life, in which humanity will not be preserved. In our world, that wipes away just in a brush memory, believed that we could separate ourselves from the totalitarianism, but this double binary has become an obvious reality. What are the effects for those who are inside, even for us? Where there is immunity, there is less community. To be immunized means to be dispensed from obligation and links. The contrary of immune is common. Individual and collective are the two faces of the immunitarian regime. Common, this beautiful adjective, is very committing, and it indicates, it points to the mutual commitment. It's not about a fusion. Belonging to a community implies to be connected, bound one to the other, constantly exposed and always vulnerable. The community cannot but be open. The community cannot be like a fortress, identical to itself, closed, defended, protected, only based on fear. In these last years, a paradoxical equivocum happened because we misthink the community with immunity. This is the end of our democracy. It is an immunitarian way of fear. An immunitarian policy that needs borders always reject what is different, what is other. Everything provokes fear. The stranger is what is intruded to the inside, the enemy at the outside. Immigration appear like the most troublesome threat. But today, we think that the enemy is again in the heart of Europe. And allow me to say that I feel at home in Berlin the first time in 1979, when there was the wall. I am afraid of the belligerent you. I am afraid of a community, of a we, that not only exclude the other, not only adopt a necro policy that allows the other to die or die in the sea, but I am always afraid of what is happening in Europe today. In the Europe of the 21st century, in my Germany, in my Italy, both coming from the most terrible crimes, we do not want an immunitarian necro policy that will divide more and more people and will create and raise new conflicts. Let me express also my disillusion for the European Union, because they look at a common defense or a common army, but this is not a result, it's not a success. I wish that there was a policy of life and a European Union that would be able to follow the task for which is born, that is to be a community of communities and to favor the coexistence of peoples for peace. Europe, this is not what Europe is today and in the last years, but I wish that it was in the next years.
Grazie. Grazie, grazie, grazie. Grazie.
Hi, thank you, Donatella Di Cesare. You have the gift to explain life with the strength of words, expressing what we are unable to say. And it reminds us all the dream and the necessity of a democracy within the European Union that includes. So we feel we're not close to this dream of inclusivity, and we feel the strength and the harshness of this you, a general you that often becomes aggressive. However, the dream of a world and a life that is detached, even within the fence and not beyond. I feel I'm generalizing here, but it feels the most successful Western religion in this historical phase is individualism, whilst everything that we love, so love, friendship, being for someone else, only exists if there is the other. Hence, I would like to thank you for these observations that we will take forward. And with this strength, I would like to give the floor to Riccardo Di Segni. So he's a well-known doctor, but he's the chief rabbi of Rome. And he is the chief of the of the eldest community in Europe. So he's the witness, really the witness of this great religion that is so connected to the Word. So I hope you're going to explain to us something about the Bible too, and I'll pass you the floor. So I join in the direction that I was given for this panel. So I am going to follow the lead. Hence, at the very beginning, at least, I'm going to talk about, in favor of the us, the we. But I'm going to put some boundaries towards the end. So the quote from the Genesis, chapter 2, 18, it's not good that the man is on your own. And this was said by the creator of the human history. And he gave Adam some company, a help in correspondence to him, so similar, but at the same time completely the opposite. So this is a nuclear model of the complexity of the entire society. So this is the first couple, which is united, still different, and still society was not born yet, the multitude of human beings. So the destiny of man is that of not being alone, but to be in need of the others. So human beings live together for necessity, to defend themselves, to exchange services. So human aggregation can be purely utilitarian. So it's egos that are gathered. So one thing is being together to give, and another is to be given, to get. So a famous anthropologist said that the first sign of progress of humanity was not a technological invention as the wheel, for instance, of the fire, but a fracture in a bone fracture that was essentially fixed and healed. So an animal that get bone fractured is lost, cannot move to feed themselves, and will be food for the others. So a person that gets a broken bone needs someone who takes care of him, that heal the wound, heal the bone, and someone who takes care of him whilst he's mobilized, he cannot move. So that's where society is born, where everyone is at the service of others. So the language, the Hebrew language, it's a very, in reality, a very poor language, and there is one word that indicates the people, which is which means being together, and another one which is eda, which is similar, it's a congregation, and has the same root of the word ed, which is witness, and ed, which is destination. So the group of people has something to say and has an objective to reach. So there are other words like keila, which is the people that gather in the assembly. When the Bible was translated in Greek, the translators were trying to find words that were very appropriate. So this word keila was translated with ecclesia, that of course has taken a lot of space in the history after. So in the book of Numbers, so the group of the 10 explorators that went into Israel, but that ruined the land of Israel, was called was an evil congregation. So it's true that the we is important, but it could be the meaning could be where the eyes oppose each other and bring forward different values. So our history has started with this evil congregation of 10 people, where the teachers have derived a rule, an important rule, which is that we should pray together, and a prayer is significant when there is a minimum of 10 people. And it's the same number between a negotiation between Abraham and God for the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Because God said, if there are 10 just people, I will not destroy the city. But in the collective prayers, we don't need 10 just people, we need 10 people. So this is the example of the list of ingredients for a scent, a perfume that needed all 10 ingredients, especially one had actually a bad flavor, but together with the others made it the scent that was very peculiar. So even the flows go and improve the group collectively. So that's why the prayer has to be collective, and even the confession is not really individual, but is collective. So everyone then will declare their sins, but in private, silently. However, because otherwise it would be an exhibition that is not supported, because it is just putting their modesty forward. So they have to do it silently. So at the time of Herod, they said, do not detach yourself from the public, which in the Talmud means share the suffering of the people. Because if you're detached and far away from the people, you can't see their sorrow, but you can't see the healing either. So we're talking about working together to improve, and it's an illusion to save oneself on their own, but also not to be conformed to the general, the mainstream. So and especially for those who are leading roles, they shouldn't detach from the role of serving the others. So there is another sentence from Hillel, which is a master from the time of Herod. He said, if not now, when? So if I'm not for myself, who is for myself? And if I'm for myself, who am I? So without getting into any rhetoric discourse, what it says that we have to take care of ourselves, because no one can take care of us, but it gives a perception that if I'm only thinking about myself, who am I? So up until now, we spoke positively about the idea of the us, but in the medieval Jewish thinking, it was said that it is part of the nature of men to be dragged in the opinion and behavior from friends and to behave like the people of their country. Hence, if man has to be united to the just and the wisdom and the wisdomous to learn from their action and stay away from evil. If a person lives in a country that has, in a sense, bad habits, and where people do not behave properly, then he has to leave and go to a place where people are just and they behave properly. And if in every country that he knows and where and no one behaves, then it's good for him to be on his own at home, to sit solitarily and in silence. And if the people are so evil and sinful that they don't leave him in peace, if he doesn't mix with them and he behaves like them, then he should go to somewhere remote and in the desert, to not take those habits of the evil. So in 1821, the writer Manzoni, he was talking about the ideal of a new society, and there's still someone who takes him as a model. What is worrying is the word altar, because it's a potential origin of discrimination. We have seen too painfully, and we are in a place that was a witness of this, what it means, what the great aggregation, political or religious national aggregations, can lead to the individual being stomped upon on his dignity, and not only those who are stranger to the group, but also who's part of the group. So an I, a self that is closed within itself, is a contradiction to the human potential. It's not realized, it's incompleted, but it's not enough to be an us. The risk of an evil congregation is always at the horizon.
Thank you, Ricardo. We've listened to you and your worries regarding the altar that can become a source of discrimination. We all know that you are, as Chief Rabbi of Rome, a man that has dialogued with Pope John Paul II. You have accompanied Pope Benedict to visit the synagogue, as well as Pope Francis, and you have visited the Great Mosque, and that you're also a witness of those meetings of dialogue for peace for many years. So your words for us have more significance, and we thank you so much. At this point, I would like to give the floor to Latifa Ibn Ziaten, who is from the association IMAD for Youth and Peace. She's from France. As we say, she's an activist, French-Moroccan. She's a mother, Imad Ibn Ziaten, a French soldier who was killed in Toulouse by a French-Algerian Islamist in a terrorist attack in 2012. The same year she founded IMAD in France. It is an interreligious association for peace aimed above all at young people. Her work has received numerous international awards. It's a witness of how evil can be overcome by good. The floor is yours. Welcome. Good morning to all of you. I'm very honored to give my testimony, to speak about my experience with the among great religious experts. Thank you for having invited me to this conference to express myself about what I do and what I live on the terrain. I'm going to talk about the man who killed my son on March 11, 2012. It was very difficult to lose a son who was just 30 years old. But I wanted to stand on my feet. I wanted to stay. And this young boy of 23, so full of hate, and to understand why he had to kill my son. I wanted to understand why. I was born in Toulouse. After 40 days again, and I followed this boy, and I wanted to know why and how. So much hate today. Where does it come from? And I asked myself, and I asked a question to the youth in the neighborhood that I visited, who were prepared by Mohammed Hamach, the killer. He didn't work on his own. There were many like him, but all the young people around him believed in him. And they thought that he was the hero and that it was a new era for Islam. And I thought, oh my God, how can I listen to that as a wounded mother when I lose my son at 30 years? Ladies and gentlemen, I look at these youth and I think, how can you think like that? So much egoism, so much hate. You're young. You have the whole future in front of you. There is suffering. I don't hide it from you, ladies and gentlemen, but there's also this problem of a closed neighborhood. There is ignorance, lack of education. There is no love for many youth. When there is more love, you know, more dedication from parents. But if there is no presence, if no framework to accompany certain youth these days, that's what causes what we live nowadays in our society. I said to these, you are the origins of my suffering, but I will not hate you. Starting from today, I will work with you. And that is the way I developed my association. And I wanted to start working with those youth in their schools as well. And have them leave the comfort of their school. But if you want to know other people, you have to leave comfort behind because you have to challenge yourself. So we created a project and to show them what is comfort and what does it mean not having any comfort. You need to know how people live, how every one of them lives. And I assure you, every project that I bring to the youth, and I go to the project with youth and I return with adults because they become stronger, they become like adults. Egoism, ladies and gentlemen, is people who think about themselves. I can give you an example. I went to Calais to look at the migrants. It hurt me, and I wanted to see them. I had so much, and I went to see those people, those men, women, those youth in the cold, in the rain, in plastic tents in France, and I thought, why this? How is it possible? How can we accept that people live like that? You cannot leave them like that. When you're cold, when you're hungry, then you're in danger, no? And it's bad for society. So everyone should do his own job. But unfortunately, that's not the fact. And I brought some gloves against the cold. And the people who were there said to me, Madam, you really are courageous to come and visit us. We are happy, we are lucky because you have the courage to speak to us. You have a heart. But I said, that's normal. I'm like you. I'm not different. It's not because I have a roof over my head that I'm better than you. We always remain brothers and sisters. If I can help you, if I can give you something, I will cry a lot, and I will shout, but I will go far. Egoism to win the other. When you look at each other, when there is a smile, that's sharing. It's sharing living together, looking at one another. And that is part of our heart, part of our love. And if you believe someone, if you look at him and accompany his route, he will be interesting in you too, because there will be this look. You don't need to talk. It's looking at someone. Today there's a separation in dialogue because of the gadgets. You have this mobile phone in your hand or on the table. Outside, doesn't matter. You have your phone in your hand. If we could separate ourselves a little bit from this gadget, we could dialogue, we could speak with our families, we can speak with our friends, with the whole world. But that's so important, to speak, to dialogue with the others. And that's what we forget today. This mother, I have a deep suffering within me, but I'm still standing. I had a son who was active in the army. We were proud of him. He was a soldier for the Republic, and he died for the Republic. And I'm still standing. I will stay standing because I had a very strong son. With my children, I have always said, if someone hits you, you stand up again. If you get a second smack in the face, you stand up again. You have to stay standing and you have to move forward. That's so important, ladies and gentlemen. And I did not lower my arm, and I'm among you and in front of you. I do 3 conferences per week in the world, in France and so on. The youth today may not be forgotten, is tomorrow's future. We are a model, and they are our pupils. So it's up to us to work until the end to raise our children. I thank you wholeheartedly. Thank you all.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Latifa. Thank you, because you remind us how hatred gets ignited in isolation, and a word and the eyes and an encounter, a hug can transform, can change a heart. And I feel this is a way, a way that we can all imitate and we can walk along together. I would like to pass the floor to Heiner Koch, which is the Archbishop. It's our host, so thank you. So it's the Catholic Archbishop from Berlin. Thank you for hosting us. And he has led the Youth Day in Cologne, and he's a theologian, and he's been a priest within the Catholic Church for 30 years.
Herzlich willkommen im Erzbistum Berlin. Als ich jetzt eben die Worte gehört habe, habe ich meine Rede etwas umgebaut, gedanklich. Ich werde ergänzen, was mir noch wichtig ist und was mir auf dem Berliner Hintergrund wichtig ist und sozusagen den Ort hier mit einbringen als meinen Beitrag in diese Diskussionsrunde.
As a contribution to the conversation.
Ist das ein möglicher Weg? Ich provoziere einmal deutlich und sage nein. Ich glaube,
From self to us, is this a possible way? Is this possible? I would like to start saying no, because there is a strong self, a strong I, and if there is a strong I hope there is a strong, because they need to go together in the good and the bad. We need a strong self so that a child can live and survive, can be born, can be nurtured and helped to develop from intellectual and physical and even spiritual point of view. So in our society, we know very well what happens when children grow without a family, when they are abandoned, when there's a lack of people that are for us their country. It's terrible if there is a lack of connection between hearts. So how can a self be developed without such strong connection? So every society, every family needs a strong self. It needs the church, but there is a strong need for a strong us so that the I can grow.
She can do directly from German.
auf diesen Alleen. In der Zeit
We are not far from the place where the big marches took place during the National Socialism. Already in the time of Weimar, And then also in the time of the Eastern Germany, that we've seen so much from the West and that frightened us so much. There was a mass movement that appeared as a strong us, but we saw later how weak these movements were, mass movements. But it wasn't a community, not a society where one stands next to the other, not a society that was responsible, that took responsibility for the masses, that acted responsibly. Let's not say that is something of the past. Thank God, it's different these days. But how many communities exist in our society that only ask, what does the state, what does society bring me? What does the church give to me? And if she doesn't give me anything, she has no use. How do we live responsibly? That means, what do I bring to this society? How do I build, how do I construct society? What's my contribution? How can people live in community and inside the community because of me? The self and the us belong together. A strong self, when the self is weak and when the us is weak, when the self is weak, the us is weak, and there are many testimonies of that in current Berlin. If we go from self to us and from us to self, that strengthens one another. We help society. The society becomes a Heimat, like a home, a homeland. It's feeling protected is being sure that you are able to grow up. I will say later why I just took this point out of many. In our society, it's my experience, this will only take place when we have many good client communities. We need small, strong communities within this big society we live in. In the digital world, where many people just experience society virtually and not on a daily basis physically, we need to support one another. In Berlin, there are 3.7 million people. No one is alone here, meaning there is not someone on my side. But how much solitude is there, door by door, where people do not notice that a neighbor died because you are no part of the life and death of your neighbors. And in Berlin, we appreciate that there are people without any relatives, that it doesn't matter when the state has to take care of funerals, we try to be present. 2,500 people are buried every year without someone accompanying them. A father and son we have honored. There is a father with a handicapped son who took it up as their job to accompany those lonely people in their funeral, that they don't have to go alone. There is a sociologist of our time who wrote a book about the big cities, lonely in the lonely masses. That is true about today. What can we do? What do we have to do? Build and construct communities. Communities so that the strong self enables a strong us. Supporting family. And I would like to say in these surroundings how important families are. Material, that the poverty of families is a shame for this wealthy society. You know that in Rome as well as we do that in Berlin. To give life and to enable life and assist people who have different family lives with poverty, with violence, that women don't have to resort to abortion because they think they cannot provide for their children. Living communities. There is a populism, and extreme right populism is here too. Many researchers there are people diverging to extreme right because they think they find here what they do not find elsewhere, that they are valued, that people say you're good, you're great. People who feel not valued, appreciated, have often small values. But we have to build communities within this society, convinced and strong communities where one takes up responsibility for the others. Because if we don't do that, populism and radicalism in our society will increase. I worry a lot that those movements increase. We need community within the church. The situation here in Berlin, 25% of the citizens are Christian, just a quarter. We have a very good relationship with the Jewish community and with the Muslim communities, with all the challenges connected to that. But we are all together convinced that we want to build communities that shows that we are in unity, in communion with God, that we are God's communion, that we help to improve, to further God's communion with the city, and be a place where the people are at home. We have to be open communities, open churches that welcomes, that invites. It's a big task, a big ask, that the church cannot be as full of itself. As Christians, brothers and sisters, we as Christians believe in that God is Father, Son, and Spirit. I would like to conclude with the image when the disciples are on the top of the mountain. They want to build 3 huts, one hut for everyone, front tent for everyone, which is a wrong individualism. And Jesus sends them down to the people who are down. He said, don't leave them alone. You are there for them. And so they go down, and on their way down to the people, down the hill, that is the way to heaven, from self to us and from us to self. With God's help, that is possible.
Grazie, Eccellenza.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You have reminded us all how this beautiful city that has gone through a revolution with bare hands and with no violence. Let the wall fall. But this revolution today needs a soul that starts again within the community, from the communities. And of course, I go to the community of Sant'Egidio, and the first meeting on the 7th of February 1968 was actually started on a reflection between high school students, and Andrea Riccardi offered consideration on how to change the world with bare hands, starting from a text, some words that talk about loneliness, incommunicability within a big city. So changing the world not alone, but through and within a community, with friendship as healing. So your contribution made me, throw back to my high school, when I was, since I joined just after the first meeting, and it gives me very much hope for the future. Thank you. So I would like now to introduce the president of the World Methodist Council from South Korea, Jong Chung Park, that leads the council from 2016. He is a pastor that has been teaching in the Seoul Methodist Theological University, but he's also been the president of the Council's Theological Education Committee. So we need Asia, we need Methodists for our soul to grow.
I received many months ago was Beyond Loneliness. And then it changed later, very recently. I didn't know. So I prepare for original title, which is, my title is Calling Beyond Loneliness. But I think it is related to the renewed title From Self to Us, especially a root to be charted will be particularly emphasized in my dealing with women from North Korea. From August 28 to 30 this year, I have completed the fourth and the last roundtable for peace on the Korean Peninsula among the Korean Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, and the World Methodist Council during my presidential term. The first roundtable started in 2016, which was the first year of my presidential term. However, I have already thought about it, though failed in carrying it out in 2015, when I decided to fast for prayer in the midst of a severe turmoil in the seminary I served as its president. In my sermon preached at the service of my retirement in 2019, I praised the divine providence for designing my life to have worked for the 3 consecutive roundtables for peace in the global scale, even though I had been mocked by most of the counterparts of the Roundtable for Peace in my seminary. One's calling from God comes without noticing it, and it has already begun even before one is born, as God said to Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appoint you as a prophet to the nations." More importantly, God comes to us when we are most lonely and about to give up our calling. Most of great prophets and apostles have gone through calling beyond loneliness. One of the most poignant texts on calling beyond loneliness is Jeremiah 15, verse 17. "I never sat in the company of revelers, never made merry with them. I sat alone because your hand was on me, and you had filled me with indignations." Unlike the words of God, which were Jeremiah's joy and his heart's delight, the company of false prophets, whom Jeremiah called revelers, never made him merry. The first prophet said, "Peace, peace," when there is no peace. And they deceived the people of Judah by saying, "This is the temple of the Lord, temple of the Lord." However, God thrusted Jeremiah out of the merry company of false prophets into loneliness, or I will say into solitude. Paul Tillich's interpretation of Jeremiah 15, verse 17 is worth quoting. God sometimes lays hands upon us. He wants us to ask the question of truth that may isolate us from most men and that can be asked only in solitude. He wants us to ask the question of justice that may bring us suffering and death, and that can grow in us only in solitude. He wants us to break through the ordinary ways of man that may bring disrepute and hatred upon us, a breakthrough that can happen only in solitude. The theme, the audacity of peace, and the sub-theme of Forum 11, from self to us, a route to be charted, challenges me to face the moment of truth, to advocate for prophetic call for the kingdom of God. That is justice, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. The World Methodist Roundtable for Peace on the Korean Peninsula has been instrumental in calling for the Kairos Korea, which will transform the people of both North and South Korea who have been victims of the East-West Cold War into the agents of South-North 상생 in Korean, which means interliving. Jeremiah, prophet after the heart of God, proclaimed on behalf of God, "Let my eyes overflow with tears night and day without ceasing, for the virgin daughter, my people, has suffered a grievous wound, a crushing blow." Resonating with Jeremiah's 심정 in Korean, which means heart, mind, of deep solidarity, I want to witness both victimization and transformation of North Korean women in China who crossed national borders to remain in the Sino-North Korean borderland as illegal economic migrants. Since the national crisis caused by severe famine and economic sanctions in 1990s, that period was called the arduous march. The breakdown of patriarchy in family as well as in nation after the death of the supreme leader Kim Il-sung has become obvious. I have come here from the World Methodist Consultation on Migration in Manila, Philippines, which was held from September 4 through 7. I shared a story of a 46-year-old North Korean woman who gave birth to a son from her second marriage to a Korean Chinese in China and decided to migrate to South Korea for better economic opportunities in 2016. When she was in China, she kept in touch with her daughter in North Korea via remittances and regular phone calls. As she wants to find a better environment for her son and economic opportunity for her husband, South Korea is clearly a good option. However, she has started to become anxious about contacting her left-behind daughter since her arrival in South Korea. She suspects that having a defecting mother would result in harsh control over her daughter compared to having a migrating mother living in China. That's why she would not pick up an international call, as it might be from the North Korean secret agency. She feels devastated that her defection would affect her daughter unfavorably. I would like to ask the Holy Spirit in my prayer to empower North Korean transnational mothers who refuses to be passive victims to affirm themselves as active agents in their productive and reproductive labor in creating new family networks in order to support the children they have left behind, as well as to secure their own safety. Besides our prayer, we need to combine acts of mercy and acts of justice. We should act to build an infrastructure of welcome and hospitality, an architecture of advocacy and solidarity, nationally, regionally, and globally. A few North Korean refugees, particularly women in China, decide to go to South Korea. Even though the journey is extremely dangerous and long from northeast China through South Asia to South Korea. The pressure of illegal status in China and the ubiquitous danger of repatriation to North Korea makes them search for a better place to settle down. I applaud the decisive advocacy of the Sant'Egidio community and Protestant churches in Italy, particularly the Mediterranean Hope, for the humanitarian corridor for the people of God on the move from Africa, the Middle East, and the Eastern Europe. I would like to appeal to this International Meeting for Peace Berlin 2023 to open a new humanitarian corridor in China in collaboration with the Ecumenical Forum for Korea Peace and Reunification and Developmental Cooperation. Let me finally invite you to stand with the people called Methodists who will gather in Gothenburg, Sweden next year with the theme On the Move, Migration, Pilgrimage, and Guiding Lights. We are facing in our world today crisis of welcome, not the crisis of migration. Many people from the global south have been already crossing the abyssal line dividing metropolitan and colonial societies. They are on the move. Therefore, God is on the move with the people of God. Yes, the church have to be on the move too. This is the Kairos moment for a call to be the church in a new way. As long as we stand in confusion and even in conflict at the crossroads, we will remain as a church in exile, caught up between the vice of the empire and the virtue of the kingdom of God. Acknowledging our origin as a church in the command of Jesus Christ, we have to look and move towards Christ's new and glorious coming, walking together forward along the road and no longer stand endlessly at the crossroads. I would like to assure you in humility and love that the World Methodist proposal for the church on the move is our Wesleyan response to Pope Francis' timely initiative to bring the ecclesial reforms forward in the direction of synodality, saying that is the future of the church in the third millennium. Thank you for your listening.
Grazie. E ci ha portato dentro
You led us a page of the world that we didn't know much, the suffering, the special suffering of the loss of relations, of the refugees who become refugees seeking future after China and after being workers in China and North Korea. And he reminds us the strength and the hope of the humanitarian corridors. I have still in my eyes the life, the question of the many refugees that many from Europe have met in Cyprus, in Lesbos this summer, and how to be treated as human beings and not as refugees, being welcomed as families and not only as individuals, really ignites again hope, gives back life to future, even in a desperate situation. And so we wish that humanitarian corridors can be one of the many answers to the need of building again this we, this us, that is not exclusive but inclusive. I'm giving the word to Oliver Roy, who is one of the greatest intellectual Europeans. He's a political scientist, an Orientalist. He teaches at the European University Institute and is co-chair of the Roman Schumann Center for Advanced Studies. But we know, and we have read many of his books. He studied the Western and European Islam, the jihadism, and also the crisis of the European societies, faith and Christianity. We are thankful to you for your work of a life. To you, the floor.
Merci.
Thank you. How to think about diversity within society. The first solution is to reserve citizenship for a specific category of people. That's apartheid. The city of Athens was a democracy, but there only was a part of the citizens, of the people living there were citizens. Before it was a real democracy, but the slaves, and therefore the black, were excluded from citizenship. Democracy in itself is not an answer on the question of diversity. The philosophy of enlightenment defined an abstract citizen. This
Que l'on a, je dirais, mis.
Modern democracy. In modern democracy, everyone is the same in front of the law. Everybody has a vote. We are outside, beyond passions. We have common goods. The idea was to define citizenship and attracted a citizenship that was open to everyone. But the problem of this agreed democracy was that it rests on an imaginary being. It was a contract, and we don't have the concrete answer of the concrete societies, of the concrete individuals. We don't have the answer of the ethnic groups who don't identify themselves in this abstract citizenship. The very model of this abstract conception of this abstract democracy is the French democracy, in which the debate about religion it's an absolute neutrality that justified the need of defending equality among citizenship. The problem we see today is on what values is this laicite founded? In the 19th century, there was an image, a philosophy of illuminism, of enlightenment. There was an optimism about progress. But as Hannah Arendt noticed in the crisis of culture after the Second World War, we have a hard time in following the philosophy of enlightenment there is a deep crisis in the European culture, especially in the political culture. In France, in the classes, we saw that there are trainers in laicite, in secularism. They explain to schools what is secularism, but they only say in negative terms, you don't need to do this, you don't need to do this, and so on. But the first positive value of laicite, of secularism, is tolerance. But without tolerance, there will be the end. So we have a hard time to found the abstract democracy on values. There is no more. This system has been in crisis for a while. So we see a going back, a return to a communitarism, that is, groups which are recognized, identified as such with their culture, their values, and their identities. So this become multiculturalism. Democratic society has to accept the diversity of various groups. But what are the criteria for to be a legitimate group? When there are social class, working class, or minority, or racial minorities, we have to find criteria, objective criteria, that are the same for everyone. But there are new questions among young people. For example, there are groups that reject any objective foundation. For example, gender identities. They are not based on biological facts. Traditional feminism had the idea that there were men and women. The homosexual movement of the 90 years was a third gender. But now we don't have this idea anymore. The group today is identified as LGBT plus 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 Q. There is a gathering of difference, but it's never ending till the individual. So in the end, the individual is the last sign who doesn't want to share his identity with anyone. So the paradox is that the identity group who wants to be recognized are founded on individualism, of being individual to the extreme. Therefore, we don't have a problem of position between democracy and a concrete society. There is not this one. But we are in the middle of the construction of building the self. How can we run this request of identification? First of all, individualization, the request of recognition from groups is to the smallest difference, to the limit of the smallest, tiniest difference, to the individual. So this idea seeks to think the difference, but this doesn't resolve the differences. It's rushing towards the most evident characteristic. There is also poverty about characteristics. It's not about reality, but about symbols on the right and on the left. Nationalism today, for example, We fight for cooking, for kitchen identity. In Italy, we have a minister for the culinary ministry. The identity is the pizza. I have nothing against pizza, but I find that it's a little poor content as a national identity. The baguette, is not a universal patrimony of our culture. Government is proud of this, and all the French are proud of it, proud of this. All we French, we have the baguette, the bread baguette. So on the press, falafel belongs to Israel or Lebanon. What identity is that? It doesn't matter, but instead it does matter. It's the same thing. So there are some markers, some characteristics which are very poor. In school, the girls don't wear the so they want to find something that differentiate them. But they want just to bother the public administration. They won't just bother the director of the school. In this bagarre, in this mess today, everything is based on symbols, and we try to prohibit symbols, but we don't wonder about the meaning of these symbols. We found that some categories we should wonder so what is the request behind these symbols? They have a request, a demand, and we need to look beyond and behind these symbols in their imagination, in their emotion. What are these people who signed behind these groups, behind these symbols? What are they looking for? So democracy is cold, and the multicultural democracy are both in crisis. Individualism is in difficulty. So we have two aporias of democracies, and we need to think this democracy back, starting from real relationship, from concrete relationships, starting from dialogue and debate in schools. We need to debate. What we heard short ago was very important. We need to listen. There are not policemen in the schools. We need to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Many among us have lost a great occasion during their school years. Many of us lost a possibility, at least me, during our school years because my difference to cause difficulty for the school director. So I was wearing the right shoes, but with holes in them. They were not recognized as UNESCO heritage. Everyone has his history. Which way, what can we what can we do to valorize our differences? At this point, I think we are very rich and enriched by a great quantity of points, matters, and I ask all of you if you want to start with underlining something, asking for a more deep answer. If you have questions, how can we build our cities concretely to overcome the difference between abstract democracy and the democracy of differences, and that is our own democratic crisis, how to overcome the isolation and the non-identification with the other. The problem is, for example, a self that is excluding the us into an aggressive self, a self that creates suffering and death. We have an incredible demand to start an architecture of the us that can be feasible in our societies. So the floor is yours, and our friends will answer, and it will be an opportunity to try and go into the deep with all the matters we already started to address. There are microphones on the fourth row. Anyone wants to make a reservation of the microphone? Obviously, there are no wrong answers. There are no wrong questions. There just sometimes are some modest answers. Please, brief questions so we have more time to answer. I'm Pietro, I'm from London. I would like to ask how can we facilitate real relationships between people and facilitate real discussions? Please set up.
Londres. Merci beaucoup à Madame qui nous a.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with you, Madam Latifa Ibn Ziaten. It was really incredible, but I'd like to thank you for your testimony and for your courage that you show every day. Thank you so much. I have a question for you. How do you live on a daily basis the relationships with other communities and the dialogue? The communities that are very present and very different in France, do they support your work in France? And a short question for Mr. Roy. I was really struck by your speech, and I really agree with you that baguette doesn't have to be UNESCO heritage. There is a parallel between the baguette and the intersectionality and the LGBTQ community. It's a bit going too far. It's a symbol that nourishes us, but it's also a community that has suffered a lot and that has a particular experience that needs to be heard, maybe. Thank you.
Altre domande? E se no cominciamo.
More questions? So we have all the questions that we carry within us. Can one save oneself on his own? Is this possible to survive? Is it possible for a democracy of individuals that are unable to identify with the other? Can this democracy survive? Isn't there the death of the other because we are unable to get ourselves in the other's shoes? And for instance, not to consider the migrants anymore as humans because they don't have a face, hence we're no longer available to really get in someone else's shoes. So these are all questions that I have for the panel here, please. So I'm Gianni from the community of Genova. I just wanted to add a consideration. We have heard about a complexity in other fora, a complexity that is very broad. So how do you see the role of the youth? We're talking about building and constructing, and my generation has to pass on the baton to the youth. So how much space are we ready to give the youth in this new building, because the world will be in their hands? Another question at the back. I would then give the floor to everyone, not only those who have been addressed directly. So I'm from the community of Sant'Egidio of Sassari in Sardinia. I really appreciated the contribution of Professor De Cesare. I was not completely in agreement with her when she referred to the pessimism that she has shared towards the European Union. As this morning in another panel, the European Union, with all the flows, remains a key player and is one of the few institutions that this year have increased the budget for humanitarian assistance vis-à-vis all the other countries that have cut it. So don't you think you've been too small towards the European Union in your judgment? Another question coming from the second row. Hello, I'm Anne. I'm a student. I'm 21 years old. I'm now part of the community of Sant'Egidio of Rome. Thank you for the words, the precious words, and I would like to tag along the topic of the youth, because I feel I'm part of Europe, but I grasp the concern that comes from these contributions today. And the topic of this forum today, from self to us, I believe in between these two words, there is the word peace. Well, actually, the word peace unites the self to take us towards the us. So peace cannot exist without the sense of plurality and the sense of us. So many selves that are united in an us that is common. Hence, I believe the word peace in the translation in different words, but in Europe, in Italian, in the etymology of the word in Italian, in Hebrew, should lead us towards a reflection. But now I would like to talk about the youth. So we look at Europe and the formation of Europe that settled after the Second World War. But now we see the war again in Europe, and I have a big concern, and I would like to share with you here of how important it is to reflect on peace, and how is that possible that Europe was born after war. Has now the war again. So we shouldn't forget about the wars and the conflicts all over the world, but it's a further concern for me. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of an answer also, apart from the question only. So I would like to give the floor, starting from Olivier Roy.
Olivier Roy.
I would like two questions. The first question is, what can we do? The problem is, what we can do is a reconstruction of social network. There's a profound crisis socially. The problem is a crisis of social network on the daily life, but also politically. Our politic doesn't work anymore in a shared way. I don't mean stop acting politically, but it should be founded on reconstruction of the community links. It's what Sant'Egidio does. She's there where people try to do something. In teaching, for example, there's much to be done. Creating debate, discussion in the schools and the gymnasia at the level of imposing the creating these discussions is very important. I am in favor of the development of base communities, of turning towards the other and not enclosing, focusing only on the community you're part of. And it's up to each of us to find out how to act in this way. The second question, you're right. I did not speak about suffering. I speak about it in my book. But here I have been asked to speak shortly and slow. So something is lacking. You have 2 minutes more, Professor. I'm joking. In fact, we see this kind of flattening of the world. We speak about markers of identity, which is flat. And that makes me turn to the domination. There's always been domination of those people who have been dominated and don't want to rest like that, want to remain like that, so they raise up. The groups that are living today as people are dominated want to be recognized in their suffering, and that's new. Before, they wanted to have their revenge, so they were having a revolutionary or anarchist attitude. They were fighting, struggling. But now they ask for recognition. There are many conflicts are taken into tribunals, to courts, and they ask there to be recognized in their suffering. That's a big argument. For example, the matter of slavery in the US. I've written a whole part of the interracial society where there are militants, Black Americans, are against the repayment of the white people. They say, you cannot look like us even if you brown, if you act like an African, because you are not part of our history of suffering. Isn't that right? A small point that's important is today everyone is suffering, everyone is complaining. There is a great literature right now about suffering, about white suffering. The suffering that white people have, that exists for more than 50 years now. Which is terrible. People are so, you have seminars to reconstruct the white evil, the white suffering. So the supremacists focus on the suffering of the white, and they're militant about it. Like Michel Houellebecq, who is not a white supremacist by force, but he focuses on suffering. He is suffering. He's rich. He may be an academic, but at the same time, all his works, all his books are about suffering. There is this request for recognition to society to be recognizing your suffering. It's not utopistic. Today, people don't believe anymore in a better future. The political form, for the first time, there is an ideology among the youth. When you speak about their future, it's not an ideology of the future, because they don't believe the future will be better. Like the nature was before. That explains also the nihilistic views. Jihadism for me is nihilistic, but that's something else. Suffering is central, is key, but she defines herself, and she serves to explain everything. So in a certain way, everyone is focused on the past. That's part of the problem.
Grazie, grazie.
Thank you, Professor.
Reverend Park, please. Reverend Park. Whatever you like after listening to all of us.
Well,
In 3 minutes.
well, I think
If
that
you were inspired by somebody,
yeah,
or if you
being
want to stress something that you could not say in your first speech.
yeah, being in Berlin, I think it is a very, very awakening and empowering experience to me, because this is my first visit to Berlin after the reunification in 1989, which symbolizes the end of the East-West Cold War. But this Cold War did not end at the Korean Peninsula, where I reside. So what is the meaning of this Berlin liberation, Berlin wall, falling down? Is it really falling? Has it really falling down? Or do you have another border between Europe and Eurasia? So that makes me very much here awakening and challenging, but at the same time prophetically suspicious of what has happened after the Ukraine-Russian war. So I want to challenge you to look at the global war and peace issues not as regional or national issue, but as a geopolitical and global issues. For instance, Korean conflict and Israeli-Palestine conflict and Ukraine-Russia conflict have to be reflected upon as a global perspective, which is not simply East-West Cold War 2.0 version, but I think it is another way of looking at the Western-centered hegemony has been challenged, whether you like it or not, by the so-called the Global South. As you saw last week that BRICS plus 6 countries have formed its own community. So that's why proposing finally is that going beyond the being victims of the East-West Cold War, Korean people and some other people in this world who are caught in the proxy war between superpowers have to challenge themselves and the world to become the agents of interliving, convivencia between the global South and global North. That is the only hope I think we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I muri non sono finiti e non sono finiti tra le persone, tra i paesi, dentro i paesi, tra mondi. È un grande lavoro da fare. E vorrei dare la parola al nostro vescovo Heiner Koch.
I would like to follow about this. There was a terrible, you just spoke about the division between North and South Korea. I think that Berlin is a place where you can learn that there are always miracles in history. If we don't dare to believe, and then if you don't have that courage, you know how history will be written. That the wall fell down, we did not consider it possible in Germany at that time. But there were people with hope. Also, that history is more than we can imagine, can allow. There are miracles in life. I'm convinced of that. Since then, we're 50 kilometers east. There's a limit between Eastern and Western Europe. Many people already live in Berlin. Many Ukrainian refugees live here in the meantime, and that works. I think our contribution as believers who rely on God is hope. Don't give up hope. Believe in hope that behind us, beyond all of us, is God. I would like to introduce the spiritual part. That is my greatest concern for society, that they do not know this part of life. Not they don't recognize it, but they're not aware of spirituality. But life is full of wonders. That's my message.
Sì. La storia.
History really is full of surprises, fortunately. And that gives us a lot of hope. And this time that seems dark for many matters. When human rights in some societies are ever more reduced to citizens' rights and exclusively there for citizens, and when the citizens at the end not are only citizens, they get limited. The greatness and the beauty of the great solidarity towards the Ukrainian refugees, our brothers and sisters, opens the big question if it's possible to have a double standard towards so many other migrants and refugees from other wars. So those questions can be answered through our life. So now I give the floor to Latifa. I would like to answer the question, if I work with other communities, yes or not. With the United States, with France, with Morocco, I'm the great regrets. I cannot meet all the requests, but I think of this youth and of today that I don't want to be forgotten. That's a big wound, and we have to repair this wound. These young are lost. Some of them are lost, and they just need that someone goes to them to meet them and is with them. And politically, I'm so sad to say, it's not my role, but I will say it anyway. Not instead of letting them return to school and return to their school year, there's a lot of pressure on them. What a shame. I don't understand this year when people return to school in my country, in France, with so much pressure on the youth, sometimes Muslim. It's so sad that we have so many problems of war, of crisis. We have overcome COVID and we have suffered so much, and today we speak about abaya, about the veil, about dresses. So sad that we have to arrive at that point with all these men and women, lawmakers, religious people. It is your task to defend the liberty from everyone. I think it's so important. The youth of today have so many difficulties. They've lived so many difficult things, terrible things. They need beauty in their life because they're the future of today. And I really think it's so important because I do 3-4 conferences per week. I forget my own family. I sacrifice everything from this youth. I really, if we just contribute 10-15%, we will make it because people are too alone. Society should stand up and should act, including towards those young Muslims. They have to, we need their advice. We all need it.
Sì. Riccardo.
Riccardo Di Segni, please. So the problem is also of the us can be negative in a society that is driven by desire, by consumerism, that desire that does not contain the other. You touched upon this towards the end. This is my question, but there were the questions from the floor as well, please. So the questions that, well, really the topics covered and the inputs from this roundtable were very many, and they come from different worlds and challenges. I would like to touch upon a specific topic. So you know that to the army, to the generals, when the war breaks, they are accused to fight the previous conflict, that they go ahead with, in their mind, with frameworks that come from past conflicts, whilst typically things have changed. So we have to realize that the world, that today's world changes, and changes in all its structures very quickly at a super speed. And it changes due to the technology, to communication, means of communication, but also from a social perspective. In the pillars of the social fight, where people in the countryside in the shop floors. Everything is changed today. And the political structures and the need of people change. So new, old ways of aggregation arise again that are connected to nationalism. That until we talk about pizza and camembert, it's like it could be they're sad, but that can be tolerated. But compared to that, we have to be extremely attentive and up to speed with what happens to understand what are the real problems and to have the tools that should be new, even partly, to fight the conflicts, to fight the fights today, because they're different. And we have to avoid rhetorical conversations, because even the concept of the us can be very dangerous. It can be a definition of us that deletes our identity, wherever this identity is expression of positive values. Hence, we should be very attentive. And if we come from religious traditions, our past should give us a lead and an inspiration for the future.
Donatella Di Cesare, tu ci hai ricordato.
Donatella Di Cesare, you reminded us about Hannah Arendt, who sent a warning between the people and non-people. So there is Hannah Arendt Street, not far from here, and there is the memorial of the people and the memory within the labyrinth where all of us, we should enter at least once in our lifetime. So I would start from there, but I'll give the floor. Thank you. Yeah, we covered very many topics. And I would like to start from a specific topic, which is the condition of being of the victim, of the need to appear in the public space as a victim, which is the new way of the fight. Who is more of a victim? So I agree fully that this has become a phenomenon that is straight in our eyes, but it has started from 1945, and it's also very interesting how the roles between the victim and the attacker are times confused, but this is the sign of the depoliticization, depending from the lack of trust in the politics and in the institutions of politics, and it's strictly connected to a new phenomenon, which is a reduction of the politics. So politics have shrinked into governance, which is just the fixing of the issues, of the problems. So this leads to technocracy, which has led to detaching from the politics for the citizens. So the citizens have detached from the politics, and especially the youth. So this is a situation where we live today, and naturally, democracy is more than divided between abstract and concrete. it's a democracy with borders. So it's a protection and security for some that ask for more and more rights, and on the other, vis-a-vis the complete lack of protection and rights for others. So Hannah Arendt in 1943, she writes, "We refugees," prophetically she sees that. She sees that there will be a humanity of level 1, and others that will not have their rights protected. So those who are protected are those that are part of the democracies and national countries, national states, and the others who will have no rights. So this situation is used. The Archbishop Koch has mentioned that it gets used from populism. We see that even here in Germany, the populism from the right side. But many push on the condition of being a victim. So this is concerning, and it's because on this there is a disgregation of the community and leads to isolation and impossibility to find a connection, a link. Hence, I feel the word identity, it's worrying. Because what is the identity? It's a ghostly word, because the individual self that each and every one of us is actually made of others. To start, for instance, with the language, it's something that comes from others. So there's not a I'm always constituted through and by someone else. So this is a big problem, and it's a political issue. So and I have 2 more points to cover. I agreed with Disegni, because it could be so that just thinking fully that the road between self and us is the only way for peace. It depends on the way the us is looked at, is considered, is built. So if we see today that the us takes the shape of the nation, of the nationalism, that of the soil, of the blood, you are a citizen because you were born here. This country belongs to you. You can push away. Well, this is not the us of the peace. This is the us that says us and you. So that puts differences. It's the us of the war, of conflicts. Hence, I would like to very carefully mention that in Italy, the Ministry of the Food Sovereignty is the same person that has spoken in public about ethnic substitution. So it's not, again, a matter of the baguette. It's actually is using the victim identity as a lever, It's very dangerous. And I come to my position towards the European Union. I'm not really pessimist. I come from the last century. I did my studies. I feel a little stranger towards this current century, because it is a century of privatization of the future, and even for the youth, there's a lot of difficulty in imagining a joint future. So I come from the 70s, where I lived in both Italy and Germany. And for us, the only thing we had in common was actually the future. Hence, for me, it's actually very difficult to understand my students and their challenges. So I'm a bit, I'm not fully convinced about the European Union because, for instance, there is a welcoming for Ukrainian refugees, which of course it's absolutely right, but it modifies the laws to accept just those coming from that side, but not the others. So it's it's a discrimination. But the European Union that make agreement with Turkey in 2015 to stop the Balkanic route and the migrants coming through Central Mediterranean and the Balkanic route. So they negotiate with Turkey and negotiations with and agreements with Libya, where there are camps for refugees. And essentially, the European Union is externalizing violence. And I link to this a European Union that, for my generation, was born. For my generation, we were there during the age of the war. So we believed in the cohabitation of European peoples. But the European Union was not and is still not able to stop this war, because the war in Ukraine, it's true, there are many more wars that we should look at and not forget. But the war in Ukraine is the great defeat for Europe. Thank you. Thank you, Donatella. We are made of the others. And this meeting today, this fora here in Berlin, testify how we would like to support and help history to show us surprises, even through a culture of resistance vis-à-vis a thought that is of resignation towards war, towards mass individualism. Hence, I believe it's not easy to rebuild a sense of us in a time of capitalism, of consumism, where Bauman teaches us that for its own nature, it produces spares. And in our time, the spares are human beings. So this is what Pope Francis have told us so many times. But today, I would like to say, with the happiness and the joy to have listened to all of you, the panel members and the audience, that this is a point of resistance and resilience. I believe we have a starting point for the future, because we all need it, and we have the right for it, and for the youth as well. Then I think about the explanation, and allow me to mention a Christian element, which is in the passage of Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, the Good Samaritan, where in the tradition, the half-dead person that gets helped, and the person that helps, so the Samaritan, which is actually the person that is not pure, but it is Jesus, but it's been taken to us as an example. The poor person, the person in need, and the Samaritan and Jesus that help in the Eastern tradition have the same face. With this empathy, we can help a surprise of the history that will give us a future full of us and not full of many selves together.
Grazie. Possiamo fare una foto insieme che non ci...
Shall we take a picture together, as it doesn't happen too often that we're together?